very much for this invitation, and then this is a great honor for me to attend this noble meeting, and it's a great honor for me to speak about the Qiyāma, but also from a historical perspective. So the main argument of my paper is to demonstrate how the Qiyāma, the concept of Qiyāma, is somehow connected with historical events, and actually this very much helps us to discover through a very special text recently published called the Dīwān-i Qāījimiyyāt. It helps us to explain in more details the last years of the Alamut period, and it's especially focusing on Mongol Nizari Ismaili connections. So there will be a gradual shift in my paper from theology to history. So, but first, let's speak about the Dīwān-i Qāījimiyyāt. I think it was mentioned before by Delia Cortese and by Karim Jawan and even Shiraz Hajiani. This is a relatively newly discovered and newly published text. It's a collection of 157 qasidas or odes. The manuscripts mainly come from Kohistan, the area of Birjand, and the oldest one is from the 17th century, but it goes back allegedly to the 15th century. Definitely that we can set up a chronology and we can prove that this text goes back to the Alamut period. And indeed, as we know, the Qiyāma of 1164 characteristically shaped the worldview of the Nizari Ismaili thinkers and poets, which resulted in the creation of this collection of odes celebrating the Qiyāma. It is interesting to see, however, that among the odes with a distinct religious content, we can discover poems dealing with the Mongol attacks of the Middle East too. Those poetic works shed an interesting light on the rather complex character of Mongol Nizari Ismaili relations before 1256. Instead of condemning the Mongols or lamenting on the havoc caused by the invading Mongol armies of Genghis Khan and his successors, we find several instances where Nizari Ismaili authors of the Dīwān-i Qāījimiyyāt, let me say authors, so generally Hassani Mahmud is considered as the main author of the Dīwān-i Qāījimiyyāt, but there is evidence that possibly other unknown or lesser known authors continued this collection of qasidas. So celebrate Mongol victories and praise the virtues of Genghis Khan, who freed Nizari Ismailis from their Sunni enemies. This jubilant pro-Mongol tone, however, of certain poems suggests a possible Nizari Ismaili-Mongol agreement around 1220, which helped the Nizari Ismailis to extend their boundaries to areas in northern Iran abandoned by the Sunni Khwarezmians who had been crushed by the Mongols. These new conquests are also listed by the Dīwān-i Qāījimiyyāt. The Mongol Nizari Ismaili honeymoon, however, ended after 1231 when Jalaluddin Mengborni, the last Khwarezm Shah, was eliminated. With the disappearance of the common enemy, Mongol Nizari Ismaili relations became more troubled, and Mongols gradually severed their stance against the Nizari Ismailis, which eventually led to the complete destruction of the Nizari Ismaili state in and after 1256. Some post-1231 poems of the Dīwān-i Qāījimiyyāt clearly reflect this changed attitude, heavily inciting against the Mongols, calling Genghis Thani, the second Genghis, that means that possibly Ögödei, the son of Genghis Khan and the successor of Genghis Khan, as the enemy of the Nizari Ismailis. One of the odes gives a vivid description of the Nizari Ismaili assassination of Chagatai Korchi, the chief Mongol military leader of the South Caucasus around 1249 or 1250. This event is celebrated by the Dīwān-i Qāījimiyyāt, but this murder of the highest ranking Mongol military figure could have been one of the main reasons, in my eyes, for the massive Mongol attack against Alamut in 1256. So the first Mongol attack against Persia and Central Asia occurred between 1219 and 1222 during the last years of Jalaluddin Hassan, its imamate. As in other cases, the Nizari Ismaili leadership of northern Persia were quite well informed about the current political events of the time, and according to Juwayni, Jalaluddin Hassan was the first Muslim ruler to try to come to terms with the Mongols after the latter had crossed the Oxus in August 1219. In the spring of 1221, it is said that Nizari envoys visited the camp of Genghis Khan near Balkh, in present-day northern Afghanistan. Possibly, I suggest, an anti-Khwarezmian alliance was made between Jalaluddin Hassan and the Mongol forces. It is not exactly known what the direct objectives and aims of these Nizari visits in the Mongol camps were, the Nizaris may have realized the menace of Mongols posed against eastern Iran and tried to seek official acknowledgement and diplomatic contacts with them at a very early period. It is important to note, however, that we do not hear about any Nizari-Mongol clashes during the first Mongol campaign against Iran, though Nizari-controlled areas in Kohistan were badly affected by devastating Mongol raids. So let me refer to Shiraz Hajian, that there is not only Alamut. We have scattered many, many groups, Nizari Ismaili groups, and we have to see this multiplicity of Nizari Ismaili identity as early as the 13th century. But first, let me surprise you with some lesser-known sources. These are Chinese Mongol sources which mention the existence of the Nizarites, calling them as Moloids. You know, the name Moloid definitely a Sunni origin, originally a Sunni name. This is the Mulhid, the heretic. But these are Chinese annals translated by Christopher Atwood, a noted Mongolist, in an still unpublished book, mentions that these Chinese annals apparently extracting informations from Mongol sources mention the existence of Nizaris, and especially the Kohistan area, which were attacked by the Mongols. Here you can see, as he was passing, the Mongol prince, through the Mulaid realm, he totally plundered them. This is the area of Kohistan, it's present in eastern Iran, it's the Iranian Afghan borderlands. And another extract from this Chinese Mongol annals saying that the imperial prince Tolui, this is the fourth son of Genghis Khan, conquers Tus, Nishaur, and other cities. Returning, he passed through the Mulaid kingdom, so the area of Tus and Kain and Tabas possibly, plundering it heavily. So possibly there were deals with the Mongols, but it doesn't mean that Ismailis didn't suffer during the first Mongol attack. However, the Dīwān-i Qāliwon is another interesting collection, as I told you, about these Mongol relations. The first part is celebrating the earliest qasidas relating to the Mongol Nizari Ismaili connections, celebrating the coming of the Mongols. مهلت دارای دین رسید به پایان و وعده مستنصر و نزار برآمد. فتنه آخر زمان به امر الهی که از قبل لشکر تتار برآمد. در همه عالم برفت و از طرف خاک تا به سپهر بری غبار برآمد. خان نخستین که بود چنگس و ما اول از اخلاص دوستدار برآمد. So what does it say? The deadline of the Lord of the Faith came to an end, and the pledge of Mustansir and Nizar became manifest. The fitna of the end of times by divine command, which had appeared with the Tatar army. Tatar is a synonym of the Mongols. So this celebrates the Qiyāma, but also celebrates and Mongols have the kind of signs of times or parts of the Qiyāma. So they came something like a miraculous saviors, spread all throughout the world and raised dust to the heaven from all sides. The first Khan was Genghis, and he first treated us with sincerity and friendship. This continues in Qasida. This was from Qasida number 49. Other friendly Qasidas you can discover in Qasida 78. I don't have time, I think, to read out all the excerpts because time is running out. But here you can see, once again, these friendly tones in English. All of you see the deeds of Genghis Khan that he did with all his grace and devotion, which has no number. His ring caught the Qaim's hand and gaze. The Imam put on his clothes along with the earth and left the ephemeral kingdom. He gave an order to Genghis Khan saying, do not speak to them, to the Nizaris, in any way but friendly. با ایشان به جز در دوستی دم مزن. And do not forsake agreement with them in anything. So this is the same positive tone reflecting possibly Jalaluddin Hassan's careful approach or cautious approach towards the Mongols, and also the clear understanding of the Nizari Ismaili diplomacy about events, dramatic events of the Middle East around 1220. Another interesting part from Qasida 124. And here quite long, but here, once again, you can see evidences of Nizari Ismaili political and military campaigns following the Mongol attacks. So here we say in the year 620, when heaven looked upon us, the most sinful whose heirs had turned deaf through ungratefulness for this blessing. He was enraged, and the flame of his wrath smote this land unwaveringly with the flame of the calamity of Genghis Khan. In the year 621, the righteous people turned their hearts in worship towards the command of the Lord of the age. Once again, we see that this kind of Mongols coming and helping us attitude in this Qasida. But also, mention is about Nizari Ismaili conquests, that following the elimination of the Khwarezmi and Sunni forces in northern Iran, the Nizaris, thanks to the Mongol support, they were able to take over castles and fortresses, extending their territories. So in Kasran and other, they were able to eliminate Nizaris, Khwarezmian governors. Also, Qasida 73, here, once again, we are hearing about the conquest of Bistam, very important place. Okay, thank you. Which became, the Imam reconstructed Bistam and its fortress, making it sturdy by divine support like Iskandar's wall. You may count realms like this up to the gates of Khwarezm. Go and see all the provinces of Khorasan. There, the decree of the deputy who is appointed as commander, it is hoped that by the sword and flag of the Lord of Fate, conquest will be made from Kairouan to Kandahar. The similar tones we see also in Tusi's works, so it's very much similar to some of Tusi's comments from the same period. However, there are different qasidas, so the complexity of the Dīwān-i Qā'immiyāt can be detected when reading other qasidas. So it is not solely an anonymously pro-Mongol work, but there are possibly other authors and other approaches, other experiences are also included. So there is Qasida 57, which distances from this pro-Mongol attitude. Other emphasizes that everything happened during the Mongols was a tragedy for everybody, for all the Muslims. So we are not exempt from the rest of the people suffering in the Central Asian territories. And also it is also mentioned that all the people of Bukhara and Samarkand are slaughtered. Look at this. And all the splendor of Khorasan does not remain. So maybe some interpretation says that this is something like a joy over the loss of the Khwarezmian Empire. No, it's not a joy, I think. It's clearly realizing that the Mongols' menace was very dangerous for everybody. It is said that during this period of Qiyāma, secrets are revealed unexpectedly, and all this does not remain hidden. And because of the matter of the attack of this age, the power, the leadership does not remain in the hands of the king, of the enemies of the world. So here maybe there's a reference to the Khwarezmians, but altogether it is more cautious and less enthusiastic about the coming of the Mongols. Possibly this is written by another author of the Dīwān-i Qā'immiyāt. As I told you, it is penned by different authors. And also there are qasidas which reflect a new age. The year 1231 is the year when Jalaluddin Mingburni, the last member of the Khwarezmian dynasty, was assassinated around Diyarbakir. And the common enemy, the common opponent of the Nizari Ismailis and the Mongols were killed, were totally eliminated. The remnants of the Khwarezmian Empire was completely eliminated. And that's why there was Mongols didn't find the Nizari Ismailis as their friends, didn't consider them as their friends. And slowly and gradually, the Mongol military machine started working against the Nizari Ismailis. And there are evidences for this change in the tone and attitude within the Dīwān-i Qā'immiyāt. Qasida 78, the same 78 which we had already discussed, continues with a dramatic twist. Then he turned, Genghis Khan, from that firm advice of the Imam and wrote a command for His Majesty, diverting from the path of the human intelligence. The Majesty is the Imam of Alamut, possibly. It's Nur ad-Din Muhammad. Genghis Khan wished that you, the Imam, should turn your face to my court now to perfect your cause. When brave Fidais were informed about this plan, they departed, risking their lives sincerely and voluntarily. the deputy, the commander, and the army chief who were said to be up in arms for vengeance, like Isfandiar, he tasted the dagger and his dark soul followed him, adding fumes to the flames of hell. That there is something like an assassination took place, but this something like it we cannot prove because this kind of Genghis Khan was not killed. He died of other reasons. However, there is a tale which is very interesting, the second Genghis and the two Chagatais. It is also an evidence of growing Mongol and Nizari Ismaili hostilities. And also the story of Chagatai Korchi, which we can prove, and who is Chagatai Korchi? Chagatai Korchi, was the chief Mongol military governor of the South Caucasus, responsible for controlling present-day Eastern Anatolia, Armenia, Georgia, South Caucasus, possibly the Caspian areas. He was killed in 1250. It is confirmed by Armenian sources. So this is not only the Dīwān-i Qāliwot, which speaks about Chagatai Korchi. And there's a letter sent by his successor, a Mongol military governor, to Karakorum, inciting the Mongols to attack the Nizari Ismailis. And it possibly because of this action which happened around 1250. What is fascinating, that this event, the assassination of this high-ranking Mongol military officer, was recorded in the Dīwān-i Qāliwot. Qasida number 49. So he says, Genghis saw, there is something about this Chagatai. There's some inaccuracy we have to acknowledge, because we know the name Chagatai can mean the second son of Genghis Khan. However, by this time, the second son of Genghis Khan was not alive, and he never ever visited the Caspian territories. Chagatai was the governor of Central Asia and Western China. But in Qasida 133, we see a detailed story about this kind of assassination, where even the Fidais or Rafiqs are mentioned. There's Husamuddin Hassan ibn Ali Jawan Mardi and others who, in a very florid and Baroque style, it is written how it happens. How and the bloodshed and confusion became so great in this area, it was as if a cloud of rubies had decorated Chagatai, and the blood became ruby. And the conclusion. As for the doctrinal background of the pro-Mongol poems of the Dīwān-i Qāliwot, the relatively strong pro-Mongol attitudes in some poems may reflect the opinion of Imam Jalaluddin and Alauddin Muhammad and the courtiers who supported a pro-Mongol policy in Alamut after 1219. The Nizari Ismailis of Alamut may have felt that the Mongol Nizari Ismaili coalition can weaken the Khwarezmians, and indeed the Nizari Ismailis gained significant territorial advantages after the first Mongol attack over the territories controlled by the Khwarezmians around 1220-23. In any case, there was nothing new or surprising in these pro-Mongol gestures in my eyes. The Nizari Ismaili elites followed a certain kind of realpolitik. During their 160 years of existence, they supported the enemies of their current enemies. There were plenty of examples of this before the Mongols. So here you can see this kind of territorial changes as well, which I tried to draw with the help of my dear friend Russell Harris and Isabel Miller, so how to demonstrate these territorial changes following the Mongol attacks. So we see that this castle and that castle came into the possession of the Ismailis, especially Bistam and Kasran and other places. And then this is also important. We are almost certain that Hasan Mahmud Khatib and Nasiruddin Tusi spent decades together in Alamut, and even before that in Kohistan, and that the pro-Mongol gestures seen in some of the Qasidas of the Dīwān-i Qāliwot suggest that this pro-Mongol political group was influential in Alamut during the first decades of the Mongol conquest of Persia. It seems likely that a significant number of people living in Alamut may have temporarily supported Mongol expansion before the final collapse of the Khwarezmian Empire. The Nizari Ismaili Mongol status quo fundamentally changed after 1231, when the Mongols gradually showed signs of hostility against the Nizaris. And with the murder of Chagatai Korchi, the chief Mongol military governor of the South Caucasus, around 1250, the once cordial Mongol-Nizari relations quickly deteriorated. However, with this erroneous step, the Nizari Ismaili state accelerated its own destruction and had no chance against the Eurasian Mongol war machine. The poetry of Dīwān-i Qāliwot, on the other hand, should remind us that Nizari, Khwarezmi, and Mongol relations were a negotiated process. which cannot be simply characterized by ideology or religion, as it was constantly recalibrated and adapted to how the Nizaris perceived the geopolitical situation of the day. Thank you very much for your attention.